My friends, life is not measured only in the years we pass through, nor in the turning of the calendar. It is measured in the awakenings of the soul, those moments when you are called to rise from the shadows of your old self into the light of something truer, nobler, and infinitely more alive. This Saturday is not simply a date. It is a threshold. It is the place where you are invited to step out of the narrow corridors of impossibility and into the wide, sunlit fields of what you were always meant to become. The great lie whispered into human ears is this: that you cannot change, that you are fixed, that your past defines your future, that the habits which bind you will hold you forever. But truth speaks another word. Truth tells you that no chain forged in weakness is stronger than the power of renewal. No failure is final unless you declare it so, and no grave dug for your hope is too deep for resurrection. The phrase "do the impossible" may sound like poetry, or perhaps a cruel jest to a weary heart. Yet impossibility is often only the label we give to what we have not yet dared to attempt. Many of the greatest victories in human history were once considered impossible. To forgive the unforgivable, to love the unlovely, to stand tall when the world expects you to bow. These are miracles as mighty as mountains moving, and they are not beyond you. A new you is not born by accident. It is chosen. It begins when you decide to walk in defiance of despair, when you stop bowing to the false gods of fear and limitation, when you refuse to let yesterday's wounds dictate tomorrow's destiny. It is not that you must become someone else entirely, but rather that the truest version of yourself, the one written into the fabric of eternity, is waiting to be uncovered beneath the dust of compromise and the rust of doubt. This Saturday may arrive quietly, like any other day, with the sun rising and the hours unfolding, but within it lies an invitation more powerful than thunder. It says, you need not be who you were. You need not be enslaved to your failures. You need not remain small when you were made for greatness. The impossible is not beyond you, because the impossible bows before the one who shaped you. So, rise, begin again, step across the threshold into the life that has been waiting for you all along. For this Saturday is not merely the turning of a page, it is the birth of a new you, and with it, the call to do the impossible. Renewal is always possible. Your past does not define your future. Renewal is always possible because human beings are not fixed creatures, but living souls with the capacity to change, to grow, and to become more than they were yesterday. The world often whispers that you are trapped, chained by the mistakes of your past, defined by the failures that haunt you, and limited by the circumstances that surround you. Yet the truth is far deeper, for no life is beyond the reach of transformation. Renewal is not a myth told to comfort weary hearts. It is a reality as certain as the dawn that follows the darkest night. Just as winter cannot hold back the green shoots of spring forever, so too the burdens of the past cannot prevent the possibility of a new beginning. To believe that your story is set in stone is to deny the very nature of life itself, for life is movement, growth, and the constant unfolding of what was once hidden within. There is a subtle temptation to think that renewal is reserved only for the strong, the disciplined, or the extraordinary. Many imagine that only saints and heroes are capable of rising above their failures, that only the most gifted can shake free from despair and live differently. But the beauty of renewal lies precisely in its reach. It is for the ordinary, the broken, the discouraged, the forgotten. Renewal does not demand perfection before it begins. It starts with willingness, with a single step, with a choice to no longer be defined by what has been. Even the smallest spark, when nurtured, can grow into a flame that warms and lights the path ahead. What you have been up to this moment may bear the marks of wounds, mistakes, and missed opportunities, but what you will be from this moment forward is still open, still waiting, still possible the human heart knows it was not made for stagnation. Deep within, there is always a stirring, an ache that whispers of something greater, of a self not yet fully realized. Renewal is the answer to that ache. It does not erase the past, but it redeems it, turning scars into testimonies and failures into lessons that strengthen. The greatest stories of transformation are not those where someone has lived a flawless life, but those where brokenness gave way to beauty, where despair gave way to hope, where what was once thought lost became the seed of something greater. Renewal teaches us that our identity is not the sum of our worst days, but the possibility of our best days yet to come. To see yourself only through the lens of what has gone wrong is to deny the deeper truth that you were made for more than your failures. Can define the reason renewal is always possible is not simply because of human willpower, for willpower alone often falters. It is possible because there is a higher source of strength that breathes life where there seems only death, that brings light where there is darkness, that whispers begin again when every voice says it is too late. Renewal is not an illusion of positive thinking, but a divine reality that flows from the truth that nothing broken is beyond repair, and no heart is beyond restoration. Even when the road seems long, even when the weight feels unbearable, there is a power greater than your weakness that can lift you, a love deeper than your despair that can hold you, and a hope stronger than your fear that can lead you forward. To embrace renewal is to refuse resignation. It is to look at your past, acknowledge it honestly, but then declare that it no longer has the right to dictate who you are becoming. It is to see every morning as a chance to rise with new strength, to choose differently, to live more fully, to walk with courage into the unknown. Renewal does not happen in a single dramatic instant for everyone. Sometimes it unfolds quietly, day by day, choice by choice, until you look back and realize you are no longer who you once were. Each act of courage, each small step of faith, each decision to continue despite difficulty is a thread woven into the fabric of your new self. Renewal is not distant. It is already at your door, waiting for you to open and step into it. The impossible is often only fear disguised as limitation. The impossible is often only fear disguised as limitation, for what we call impossible is frequently nothing more than the reflection of our doubts, our reluctance, and the walls we build within ourselves. When someone says it cannot be done, they are rarely speaking of the true nature of the world. They are usually speaking of the limits of their own courage or imagination. History is filled with countless moments where the impossible was declared with certainty, only to be overturned by those who dared to see differently. It was once impossible to cross great oceans, to soar in the sky like birds, to send voices across the earth in an instant, and yet each of these impossibilities crumbled before vision, persistence, and faith. What seemed unreachable was never unreachable at all. It only waited for someone to refuse the authority of fear. Fear cloaks itself in the language of reason. It whispers that you are too weak, too late, too flawed, too unworthy, that the mountain is too high, the path too narrow, the risk too dangerous. Yet fear is a poor prophet, for it speaks of what may go wrong, but never sees the strength that grows when you begin. To name something impossible is often to give fear the final word, to declare that defeat is inevitable before the battle has begun. But courage unmasks fear for what it is, a shadow, not a wall. When you step forward despite trembling, you discover that much of what you feared was smoke that vanishes when touched. The impossible becomes possible not when circumstances shift, but when the heart learns to stand in defiance of its own doubts. Limitations are often inherited beliefs. Perhaps you were told as a child that certain doors were closed to you, that people like you do not achieve certain things, that you must stay within boundaries drawn by others. Over time, those words become internalized, and you begin to mistake them for truth. Yet the human spirit was never designed for such confinement. Within every person lies a seed of greatness, a capacity for courage, a call to rise beyond imposed ceilings. The impossible endures only so long as you accept those ceilings as law. The moment you question them, the moment you dare to push, you find that the limits begin to crack, and the wide horizon opens before you. Even more deceptive is the way impossibility disguises itself in the ordinary rhythms of life. Routine and habit can be as strong as chains, convincing you that what has always been will always be. To imagine breaking free from cycles of failure, addiction, or despair can feel impossible precisely because you have lived with them so long. Yet history shows that impossibility often lives only until someone is bold enough to attempt what others consider unthinkable. The chains are real, but they are not unbreakable. The walls are high, but they are not infinite. What keeps most people bound is not the actual strength of the walls, but the belief that climbing them is beyond reach. The truth is that the walls were never meant to be the end of the story. They are there to test the strength of your desire to be free. When you look closely at impossibility, you begin to see that it is not a statement of reality, but a reflection of perspective. What is impossible for one person may be effortless for another, not because the world has changed, but because one chose to believe differently. A person drowning in despair may think it impossible to live with joy again, while another who has walked through the valley of shadows testifies that joy can return stronger than before. A person enslaved to failure may think it impossible to rise, while another who has stumbled countless times stands as proof that rising is not only possible, but inevitable for those who refuse to stay down. The impossible is not a fixed wall, but a shifting illusion, a mask worn by fear until someone tears it away. To confront the impossible requires more than mere will. It requires vision. Vision sees beyond the immediate struggle, beyond the present pain, beyond the limits of logic that insist nothing more can be done. Vision imagines what could be and moves toward it with steady steps, even when no evidence yet supports it. It is not recklessness, but faith in action. Faith that the unseen is as real as the seen. Faith that the impossible is not a barrier, but a threshold to something greater. When you walk in such vision, the very act of stepping forward transforms the landscape. What once seemed immovable begins to shift, not because the world has suddenly grown easier, but because you have chosen to see differently and act with courage. A new self is born by choice, through courage, and by stepping into divine strength. A new self is born by choice, through courage, and by stepping into divine strength. Transformation does not come merely by wishing, nor does it descend by accident without the will to receive it. It begins with a decision, a conscious turning of the heart, a refusal to remain where one has always been. Choice is the spark of renewal, for every person is given the dignity of freedom, the power to decide whether to stay in the shadows or to step into the light. Without choice, change is only a dream, but with choice, even the most unlikely soul can rise into something new. The weight of the past does not vanish in a moment, but the decision to move forward cuts the first path through the wilderness. It is in the act of choosing that a person declares, "I will no longer be bound by what has been. I will no longer surrender to despair. I will no longer live beneath the calling written within me." Yet choice alone is not enough, for every true choice demands courage. To begin again is to face uncertainty, to step into waters whose depths you cannot fully measure, to walk roads where the end is hidden from view. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to bow before it. It is the inner fire that pushes one foot in front of the other, even when the heart trembles. Courage faces the laughter of skeptics, the doubts of one's own mind, the setbacks that threaten to undo progress. Without courage, choice remains a silent intention. With courage, it becomes a living reality. The birth of a new self will always demand courage, because to shed the old is to leave behind what was familiar, and the familiar, even when painful, can feel safer than the unknown. But courage knows that the unknown holds treasures that the familiar can never provide. Still, courage and choice find their fullest power only when joined with divine strength. Human will can begin the journey, but it is limited, prone to faltering when storms rise too high. There are burdens too heavy for one person to carry alone, wounds too deep for mere determination to heal, chains too strong for human effort to break. Here is where divine strength enters, not as a distant force, but as a presence that upholds, a power that renews, a hand that lifts when knees buckle. To step into divine strength is to admit that you cannot remake yourself by your own power, but you can be remade by the one who knows the true pattern of your life. It is not weakness to lean on such strength. It is wisdom, for in that strength is found the endurance to persevere and the grace to rise even after countless falls. The birth of a new self is not a single moment, but a continual unfolding, like the dawn that grows brighter until full day. Each choice, each act of courage, each reliance upon divine strength weaves together to form the fabric of the new identity. At first, the changes may be subtle, barely noticeable, but over time the old self begins to fade, and what emerges is truer, stronger, more alive. A heart that once clung to bitterness discovers forgiveness. A soul once burdened with despair learns to hope again. A life once lived in fear begins to walk with boldness. These shifts are not accidents, but the natural result of a decision that is renewed daily, a courage that refuses to quit, and a strength that is not one's own but gifted from above. The new self is not about becoming someone entirely different, but about uncovering who you were always meant to be. Beneath the layers of compromise and the scars of failure lies a self designed for greatness, for love, for truth. It is not that you are asked to abandon your identity, but rather to step into its fullest expression, to rise into the version of yourself that was hidden beneath doubt and fear. This birth is a discovery as much as it is a transformation. It is a remembering of what was placed within you from the beginning, a reclaiming of what seemed lost, a realization that the impossible has become possible because you chose, you dared, and you leaned into strength greater than your own.